Hello and welcome everyone, a warm welcome to every one of you. I appreciate your continuing participation in the Reflective Dialectic and your intention to extract some utility from the process, the provocations and the propaganda that surround human identity, diversity and life choice issues. I also welcome the digital surface on the other side of a camera lens. My name is Philip and I'm presenting this reflective analysis lectures and practical sessions. Now, these sessions provide a chart to navigate through the stormy conditions created by identity politics of being, sex and death. Now, for the sake of transparency, I declare that I make use of an origin of knowledge perspective. It's a dialectic from which we can derive a synthesis, as I've explained before. Now, today is a male-female sexes, and it's going to be a bit of a long video because a long session, because I've combined the female sexes, the duality, sexes duality, with a gender crisis. Now, it's not going to take much longer than it would have originally, but I'll allow for one or two breaks. Not like last time, where I continued with the race differences for much too long. Now, let me get on with it so that we can get finished. The male-female duality is widespread in nature, and even some plants exploit this revolutionary way of ensuring the survival of offspring. So the male-female sex duality is first of all a way to ensure a survival for offspring. It's for the benefit of a species, not for the benefit of a father or a mother. Unfortunately, human memory gets lost in the delusion when humans explore nature and roles of Homo sapiens, male and female sexes. Well, we tend to just get lost in general within the delusions of life. It's normally because there's a lack of knowledge on the one side, and we exclude knowledge purposefully to save the perspectives we have on life. Those two things happen. So what do we have here? The duality increases species fitness. The duality increases species fitness and comes with species-specific behavior and roles for each of the two sexes. So no matter at which species you look, you will find there are roles allocated to them. And it's always for the fitness of a species. But it's vastly different between the different species. Now, role differentiations exist throughout the process, from attracting a mate to the independence of offspring. So, in some species you attract a mate and get over with. In other species it's a commitment. It depends on the offspring, how much energy they take to get to independence. So the more energy is needed, the more both parents will take a specific role. Now, at some point in the past, the creation myths were used to explain the sex duality and sex roles in absolutely purity terms. Many creation creators reject the evolutionary survival practice because of lack of knowledge and the lack of developing a mental dynamic. So what I'm saying here is the the religions, some of them, not all of them, I can't speak for all of them, only for those I know about, they tend to have a very specific Adam and Eve narrative. And let me just draw it on the board here for you. And it will look like this. Male, female, and there's no link between the two. That is the creationist. Okay. Also, the female or woman was a part of a body of the man in one explanation, and in another, I assume Adam, who was to give names to all the other animal species, looked too tenderly into the eyes of one of the goats, and the decision was made to create a female. And in one story it was from clay, and then he started looking funny at this clay female form, and she was given life. So that there is now a link between the two, or sex. And the sex had a purpose. It was to create offspring. So, of late, society is in turmoil because of changes. Currently, the male-female duality must deal with a couple of things. One, social, political, economic enlightenment. That goes for Western countries. Two, industrious mobilization, and that goes for most countries in which where there are some economic development. Three, technological advances. Now that goes for most countries. Four, high population density. That goes for most countries. And five, high-speed mobility. And six, the move forward from industrialization to digitization. Now, all work are less labor-intensive and more intellectually driven. So that also changes the dynamic between the sexes for humans. And also we work less in some countries. In countries like China, they work 10 days, 1 day off, or a month, 1 day off. But in some European countries, they're trying to get away with a 4-day work week. I think it will be more productive. I disagree, but that's only for me to disagree. Right, there's less specific location to information. You don't go to a mine and be a miner. You work from anywhere. Now, this creates new challenges, especially this intellectual work for male-female relations that made both the ecological tribal duality roles and the purity roles. This one over here, purity roles, irrelevant. So what happened in biology, in evolution over years, is now irrelevant for the species, as well as our creationist duality. To extract the best extremes to ensure a survival fit offspring in the current environment from information demand, high energy thinking, to open new perspectives. So we're going to have to put more energy into thinking about how it's changing. Now, 3 basic ways to perceive male-female distribution drift around the public space of a gender debate. So what I'm saying is there's some male-female distribution drift in public spaces. And this is according to the debate. Things are changing all the time. The feminist movement, part of it. In terms of popularity, these perspectives are the 2 precise, perfect, mutually exclusive, biological precasted sexes from a purity view of religion. This is a static attractor, or maybe even a periodic attractor. It changes from time to time, but it goes back and forth. It stays within a specific band of what's allowed and what not. For instance, in some religions, and even in Christian religion 300, 400 years ago, a woman was kind of have to stay in the kitchen and to tend to her children. Now it's different. She goes out and work, and some men stay at home to look after the children. So, and then there's now a debate again that maybe that should not be that way. So it goes like that. The indefinite weakly differentiated random distribution, ideal flatliner, of equal and equity. Gender is a choice, a chaotic perspective within an unconstrained idea horizon. It's this one. It's just how it looks like. You choose where you want to be. And this is what we call the LGBTQ. I think it's AI, but there can be quite a number of them. You'll see that I've now included this into the male-female duality, and it will make the, as I may have said, videos, the discussion slightly longer. So, the third one, the natural or normal distribution of genetic and biochemically produced sexes in the ecological space, a constrained dynamic adaptive perspective. So this is what I've drawn over here, and this is what we find in nature, if I can put it that way. It's ecological, and you see we are linked on a continuum, and there's a cross-section or an intersection over here. But we'll get to that. And it's constrained by nature. And in this case, it's not only constrained by genes, but also by what I call schemes, that is the cell intelligence. It's electrochemical. And there's a doctor, I now can remember his name, Levine, that's what I can remember now, and he's concentrating on that area of the biology spectrum. Now, sections 1.1 and 1.2 concentrates, this is the first things I will speak about, on statistical normal distribution, and then we'll go to purity and the LGB or the hyper social discussions. Right. These 3 basic ways to perceive a sex's distribution also impact on sex as action. follows a continuum of male, female, and intersectionality. So if you look at the biological, you've got male, you've got female, and in the continuum here, there's intersexuality. Now, intersexuality may mean that the person has got both genitals, one more dominant than the other. And I think we'll talk about that, if I remember correctly. Right, now, let's look at the ecological development of sexes as angle of incidence. And the angle of incidence comes from the origins of knowledge perspective, which we are looking at. Organisms started to exploit the survival benefits of differentiation and fusion of genetic material and the emergence of the two sexes. And this seemed to be ultimately evolutionary outcome for the survival fit offspring. There's quite a number of different ways in which this fusion of a male-female for offspring happens. To give you an idea, let me go there for a moment. See if I can find it. Remember, I asked you to look at Antonia Foster, the biologist, what she's got to say about LGBT. So, the first thing she says is more than 1,500 species of animals do it, and about a third of those regularly. She's talking about the LGBT story over there. But on the fusion side, just see, the males, human males, has got an XY chromosome. In humans, this is the XY. And women has got the XX. Now, in birds, it's just the opposite. It changes. So it's not always the same. Bees are radically different because they've got 3 different outcomes. The female, the queen is a female, and she will mate once and then have offspring as she decides to. And if she fertilizes the egg, then it will be a female worker. And most of the bees you see are female workers. Then there will be, if she decides not to fertilize a specific egg for a specific reason, a drone will emerge from the egg, not fertilized, and that means that the drone, the male bee, wouldn't have a father, if you look at it that way. But that male bee is there only to have sex once and then die. So, then there's the lizards. And the whip-tail lizard, actually, they are all female. And she will start producing eggs, the one lizard, if another female lizard will mount her. So, but the only females will be born. So they got rid of men or males completely. Now, what I wanted to say originally was a fungus has 28,000 specific fungus, 28,000 different mating types. So we can call this then mating types, And it's not only the duality, it's not only the same sex, there can be a whole lot of them, and for some reason, most higher animals use the female duality, and I assume there's some benefit into it. Well, not assume, I think it's quite clear. Right, let me get back to the original notes. Where were we? Now, exploring the primordial solutions of organisms to ensure long-term continuation of their species, we must rely on the work of many scientists over a long period of time. We must differentiate between the cover science in full focus and cover science in full focus. The sciences of, and this is a different, you can't just talk about science. What do you mean by it? So I've got here the science of content, which focuses on biological incidents and its features such as embodied genes and atomic differentiation and specialization. So what you see, then there's a science of context. So we had content, now context. And that focuses on the development process since origin. So as animals developed in evolution, we find different things. As humans developed since we became Homo sapiens, and our brain size went up and down, and remember we spoke about that. And when we had the race talk. So all those comes in the science of context. Anthropology is one of them. So when there is the science of complexification, it's focused on a synthesis between context and content. And in some way, that's just what we do all the time in this series. But the synthesis do include a cosmic interpretation, which is subjective, qualitative. When we do complication and we kind of integrate content and context, there's some subjectivity to it. We used brass vases 3,000 years ago. We find the vase. What did they do with that vase? What was the purpose of that vase? That is some interpretation. Now, especially when you look at when people started to rely on alcohol, there's a lot of interpretation, and it is thousands of years back, so alcohol is important in our lives. Right, and then there's a postmodernist, radical postmodernists, which they don't even look at this. They just decide from their ideas, from their imaginations, where they want to be. We look at that a little bit later. Now, let's talk a bit more about the gene splitting and merging of role responsibilities. The male and female bodies are different, and across many species the chromosomes play a big part in whether the developing individual is privileged to be a female that produces eggs, or which is to be fertilized, or privileged to be a male that produces semen used to fertilize the eggs of a female. This dual sexes phenomenon is a biological strategy that, although costly in organization, remember we spoke about the lizards? That's less costly than this strategy where the genes are split over here and over here and then integrated and put together for offspring. So this is a high-cost strategy, and yet must be so successful that so many animals are using it. Animal species. So with this strategy, variation is also much greater than with a whip-tailed lizard strategy, where they are actually clones. So it's for the greater good of a species, this strategy. Now let's get to the male-female distribution, which is exactly what is on the board with our drawn here. You've got a continuum. I'm moving away from this one, that one, the Adam, Eve one. So what happens is on the masculine side, you get a normal distribution. Please note, I'm using the word normal distribution. Whatever is here is normal in nature. That doesn't mean it's good. That's a fallacy, a Gaia fallacy. It just means that's what's happening. But that's what is happening. Same here on the female side. So what do we have? We have what we call the expression masculine and the expression feminine. And here you will see this individual, the XY chromosomes and the, what I call schemes, work together and you get an absolutely perfect man, if I can call that, or male. It's a very good sample. Same happens in a female with the XX. They work together perfectly, and remember there can be variation even at this stage. So for now I'm assuming it's perfect, and the schemes, the cells and how they reproduce work perfectly together, and we've got a perfect sample of a female. So, but that's a pretty small percentage. I'm not sure about the percentage, but I doubt it will differ much from 15%. 15% of females, 15% of males will be very close to perfect samples of what they represent. Remember, we're talking about biology here. Then over here, let me get a different pen, if it works. Let's see. Perfect. This area over here, even a little bit higher, you'll find a person like me, a male body, but a little bit emotional and a little bit feminine from time to time. So I would guess I would be around about here. So not that perfect. Then same happens on the female side. But when you get to this area over here, and I haven't got a different color here, this area over here, the intersect, do it that way. What happens? There can be a switch. It can be a male body with a perfect female personality, or a female body with a perfect male personality or orientation, or whatever you want to call it. They like their names, so I'm not going to interfere. What am I saying? I'm saying it's perfectly normal. It's perfectly normal that a female can have 2 female genitalia, or what a male can have one of both. It's a very low percentage, below 1%, if I can remember correctly, but it can happen. And it's normal. So, normal within environmental space. So, then, the purity people, well, actually, I don't know what they do with that. Because the biology is there, they just have to deny it in some way. They just deny it. And so, where were we? Let me see. The continuum 2 curves display phase shift and the overlap, I've said that. Small percentage, 15%, I said that. A large percentage, say 70%. Is over here, I covered that. I try normally to stick to a text as much as I can, because one wrong word and I get cancelled. And you have to give me another 2-3 hours before you cancel me. So, I'm just saying. Now, a small percentage, say less than 10% to 2 curves, bottom out at the ends, where they intersect, like we've done. This is over here. Physiology is disrupted, anti-psychology is disrupted. A small percentage, say 5% at the bottom extremes of a continuum which presents individuals with no sexual inclination. Right, this can vary greatly across species. What I'm talking about now is the areas over here and here, where the individual has almost no sex drive or no sex drive at all, and prefer not to get involved. Now, I'm not talking about people who's not getting involved because they are here and they remain in the closet. I'm not talking about them. This is people really where the chemicals in the brain are such that they can't form an attraction at all. So, I've covered that, and I'll get back to these spaces when we do the LGBTQ, because it gets very interesting. But for now, I would say this is the asexual. Over here, and over here. Right. What else do we have? Let's see. Distribution pattern holds across many species. The trick is used to male-female reproduction, but the variation between species may be very significant. In the case of humans, the pattern must, according to our imaginary experiences, and therefore okay, I'm talking here about the sexual radical theatre, and the 2 distribution goes into sex and connected imaginary inverted curve. Right, what I'm talking about here is back to the LGB. Here's a curve over here. I'm going to draw it like that. So it's quite prominent. I'm going to even color it, if I can. Not really. And this is now over here, we've got L G, lesbian, gay, and bisexual. And then we've got asexual over here. So lesbian, gay, and bisexual. Should have been the other way around. And then over here, we've got the rest. What's it? We've got trans. Now remember, trans is only possible, or not only possible, mainly possible, if an animal wears clothes. And then queer is actually kind of the term they use for all of this. So it's trans and queer, which we've got here. I'll fill in more as we go along. So those are the imaginary ones. They don't stick to reality, they don't stick to a biology. It's more cultural. It's written right here, it's cultural. Now, and mostly it's opposing to the creationist, they oppose each other. At the bottom extremes of a continuation which presents individuals with no sexual inclination, at least for human tendencies, we must also look at incest. So you'll find incest over here, and also, where is it? Pedophilia. Now, there's a debate in the pedophilia community. They want to be included over here, or still wants to, but they seem to not getting the approval. Remember, there's this A plus, where the plus, got the plus over here as well, and they want to be one of the pluses. But that's not happening soon, I assume. But other things also happens. You get zoophilia, or bestiality, over here. Now, also over here. So this can stand for asexual, but it can also be incest, pedophilia, and zoophilia. So they are definitely not part of the LGBT community. The LGBT community are real in biological terms. The TQ plus are not real, they're imaginary. So you cannot bring the biological over here and equalize it to the imaginary. Over here. You cannot do it. Now also, what is in the difference between the pedophilia, the incest, and zoophilia? Why am I putting them over here and not over here? Well, zoophilia we will find in nature as well, where there's some attraction between some species, some different species, sometimes. So that's not absolutely abnormal from an ecological point of view. Is it too much for you? Well, you just have to get your head around it over time. You don't have to agree with me, but if you really want to understand the phenomenon, you actually have to give some time to what I'm saying. Now, there's another one, a new one. Not self-indulgence is not new, but using devices like sex robots. So let's call it robotphilia. Wrong one. I don't know what else to call it. Let's call it robotphilia. Or maybe I was just thinking of something else. Humanoid philia or something like that. Humanoidia. Now, so there's another story over here. Remember, this is imaginary, but imaginary can be here as well. And this is when we see Wonder Man, or Wonder Woman, Superman, Superwoman. They are here as well, but they are imaginary. So you get imaginary over here, and someone is falling asleep. And you're getting imaginary over here. So, am I boring? I hope not. But I know I am. Right, all about that. That was very exciting. Let me see what I've got here. The fact that male-female sexuality is fractured in a minority of births. Here's a statistic. Less than 1 in 5,000 requires examination of sexual organs. So, in less than 1 in 5,000, you will have, but a doctor needs to examine a patient just born for the genitals, male, female, or both of one. So there can be deformations. A person can have 2 uteruses. It has happened, and it will happen in the future. So, where does it leave it us over here? I'm not sure. Right. What is common and specific within the sex's duality? Now, I've gone to great lengths to tell you that there's a phase shift over here from male to female with an intersect. But what's the same in females and males? And there's a whole lot of things, but I've got 3 over here. First of all, I say personality. Personality does not really, although I mentioned it earlier when I spoke about this, about me and my emotionality, my femaleness. Emotionality is personality is very much the same between the 2 groups, but it depends, it differs from individual to individual. So, if you've got an abrasive personality, I'm not going to use the terms Jung used. Those of you who know me will know I'm not a fan of Jung or Freud. An abrasive personality, you will find it mostly in men, but you can find women who's got abrasive personalities. You've got submissive personalities. Sorry, I use the Jung there, and you get them in both. So personality fractures not according to the male-female duality, but according to individuals. From one individual to the other. You might find more of them in one and less of them in the other, but normally not. Now, intelligence. Remember we had intelligence, IQ, with race, and some of you disagreed with me when I said that East and West, there's a difference, and West comes second. So what about when we talk about the male-female duality? There's absolutely no difference. Absolutely no difference. But, again the but, now that woman has eventually got some freedom to go and study and to have a career, they work much harder at it than the males. So by 10 in the last 30 years, more women got bachelor degrees in Western universities than men. But I will stick to my idea that it's exactly the same. Okay. When it comes to innovation and leadership challenges, it's exactly the same. When the ability to build character shows its own normal distribution curve between pragmatic and integrity. Now, in my philosophy for my life is that we have to build character for ourselves. And it's absolutely the same. We've got the same ability whether you're male or female. I sometimes think some females are more successful than males, but I won't put my head on a chopping block for that. So we're working towards integrity. You will find it strange that I've got pragmatism over here and integrity over here, and you'll think it's the same thing. But pragmatism has got a problem. You get good and bad pragmatism. I've had that experience before, where, let's be pragmatic here, means, can I pay a bribe and get what I want? Now, at that specific day, I changed my idea about pragmatism. There's another thing, I wanted to say earlier, and I forgot. When I said, what's the difference between pedophilia, incest, and zoophilia? Why can't they be in this imaginary group? And the one reason was, these are not imaginary, but remember this is also not imaginary, but I got this explanation from a person with a doctorate, a person who is a professor, and a person who is a psychoanalytical psychologist, one of Freud's people. And her reply was, there's no consent. Or whether that's always true, I'm not sure. But she said, the child can't give consent. And then she defines a child, I assume somebody under 16. But remember when we spoke earlier in one of the previous lectures, I said, adulthood for humans are at around about 12, biologically speaking. So, I'm not sure about that explanation, but if it makes her happy, I'm happy. I'm more happy with this explanation. So, where are we? Or where were we? Let's go to role selection and responsibility among the sexes. And when you go to roles and role selection and responsibilities, I'm actually talking to the LGBTQ or the postmodernists movement. The postmodernists actually are only using the LGBT community to kind of give some form of legitimacy to their arguments. And that's the only legitimacy they have. What's the text saying? Although the gene complexification is remarkably similar, specific across species, the rituals before, during, and after fertilization differ significantly, as does different role responsibilities. What I'm saying is not a human thing. I said it earlier as well. It's not a human thing. It's across species. When it comes to creating offspring, there are some rituals. And remember, in the race theory, we spoke about this one bird with the different colors of legs. And there's a whole ritual for a male to convince a female he's of the same race, if I remember correctly. That's the word. So it varies, and it's very much the same for all animals. And it can be that the male is allowed to fertilize the eggs, but is then eaten. So he offers his life just for this one chance. And then the female looks after the offspring, or the offspring looks after themselves. And then there is, in some birds, where the female just leaves and the male ostriches. The male looks after the offspring. And in ostriches, some males kind of just mixing with the other male to make sure the other male takes his offspring as well and look after them. He's a bit lazy. So, but that's the ostrich story. What's next? The roles of each sex are dependent on the level of time and energy the parent must invest to ensure the offspring reach independence. Remember, we spoke about that. And the investment is a function of the following things that I didn't mention. First, dependence of offspring. Now, when you see a buck, she gives birth, and within minutes, the offspring is on his legs and can walk to the mother. You get a human baby, it takes a human baby about 18 months just to walk. So, that dependence. So, for a female buck, it's much easier not to have to worry about the dad in her life. So in the case of humans, there's a lot of energy which has to go into there. So it needs two parents, or it needs a community to look after the child. And we'll get to that as well. Right, making a home. So the buck doesn't make a home. They just wander around. But birds, for instance, and many other species, they make homes of some kind, humans as well. And that takes energy. You'll be surprised of how much energy some birds put into their homes. to convince a female to join them. So, attending to offspring varies across species. I've said that. In some species, behavioral roles and responsibilities are reversed, and male takes the share. I mentioned the ostriches. Right. So, when critical postmodernists, as they like to call themselves, or radicals, talk about the roles of females and males, can they please look at all the species, and can they please then tune their story to what the ecology tells us is happening, and also take into account our different lifestyles. Right. In our case, we actually in a position where we can make a choice. We've got a choice. We can make decisions. The mother and the father can get together and says, look, this is what I will do, or this is what I will do. And in some cases, the woman works and the husband looks after the children, as I've said before. Of course, today there are choices in and this is important, in liberal countries where there are freedoms. And what's the radical postmodernists fighting against? Liberal countries, because they want to liberate it. They want to liberate themselves. They're not liberated, they think. They are still victims of something. Right. A focus on two static sexes or gender may be problematic. And we must remember that there's real-world consequences to what we have here. There are real-world consequences for people over here, and there are real-world consequences for the people over there, as well as those in between. And I've depicted myself as an in-between something. Now, what happens in sport, for example? And we had that court case in, I think it was running, can't remember, South African woman who has a lot of testosterone, but she's a woman, so she competes here. And then, as she competes as a female, but she wins every one because of her natural testosterone levels. So one court decision was, we must bring her testosterone down. She must go on some medical prescription. And that was taken to court because it's a human rights violation. What would have been easier to just chop her down over here, chop her down over there, measure the testosterone and say, this group compete as male, this group compete as middle testosterone, and that group as female, or low testosterone. High testosterone, middle testosterone, low testosterone. We do it in boxing. You don't get a heavy, tall guy fighting a guy like me. You know, it just doesn't happen. There are weight categories. And children compete under age this, under age that, under age that. It's not all the children together. So we can do it over here as well. But it didn't happen. Why didn't it happen? Because people do not understand the process, the natural processes. So yes, it's not so fixed as we think. Now, there are jobs which require tall people. There are jobs that require small people, jockeys for instance. Now, for tall people, and that's amazing to me, in the 1960s, 1950s, you want to become a flight attendant. You had to be tall enough to put the luggage there above the seats. So we wanted to be tall. Then comes, let's all be equal. I say, no, you can't do that. That's discrimination. Now, nature discriminated by making some people short, other people tall. That doesn't count. Remember, nature doesn't exist. So now I get onto a plane and I find this short flight attendant and she can't get the package on top. So some of the taller males normally help her doing it. Do a job for her. Because of not so much equality, but equity of outcomes. Okay, enough about that. Now, what about illnesses? Does nature have equality of illness? No, not at all. Various illnesses target one sex more than the other. In color blindness, for instance, men are more likely to be colorblind than women. I don't have a statistic here, so you just have to believe me on that one. For color blindness, for example, the male population are far more likely to be affected. In a rational mind, we cannot demand male-female equality or equity from nature to force it onto Gaian rule. Remember, we use the word Gaian to speak about the living organism on Earth. Now, learning and brain function development patterns as a function of the sexes. So we had this previously where I said our intellect is the same across both. So in human evolution we learn about androgynous individuals from the Greeks almost 3,000 years ago. These individuals are partly male, partly female in appearance. And the andro part of a word refers to man-like, and the goon part refers to woman-like. This means that the knowledge of a complex dynamic boundary between male and female was already apparent 3,000, 2,000 years ago. People already knew about it, and they had the word androgynous. So we will get to that word again. Now, I'm saying evolution is a great equalizer in the male-female intelligence. We had that, so I'm going to skip this. To some extent, let me just see. The same goes for the development of technological skills, not only intelligence, as we move into an area of democratic collaboration, automation, digitization, and robot servitude. Male and females are almost equal because it asks for intelligence, not for muscle power. Okay, I say also character and personality holds. and become more functional than the differences. So male and female are more functional, and the differences just disappear in some cases. And the role and expectations of the two sexes may be converging as a result of contextual changes. We had that. So I think I can skip this incompletion. But we can negotiate. We've already had that. I went ahead of myself. There may be a biased differences between males and females. Where? In hunting. In the years of the people who just invented fire, hunting was an intelligence for men. They developed their intelligence around that, and women developed their intelligence around nurturing, nursing, and appeasing. So women kept the society together. That's what I mean by appeasing. I think in some cases we still do it today. All biological differences have to be relevant to a species, and this is important. Biological differences have to be relevant to a species' survival and development for it to succeed. The species evolved around this difference, and it's valuable to that species. And for that species to succeed, we must nurture this, if I can put it that way. It is not to the benefit of any sophisticated species if the ability to make sense of living is lower in one sex than the other. It's just pure logic. The species won't succeed if it's a high-minded species and there's a difference between male and female. The sophisticated skills and mental abilities required in today's workplace were not shaped to the standard of evolution. Remember? So we now have a choice. Right, let's go on. Ecological development influenced cultural solutions in the male-female duality. So let's talk about the roles. Over eons, Homo sapiens constructed several solutions to manage male-female duality. So what I'm saying is, over time, another species not so much, but in humans, where the development of a mind was very rapid, we had to change our roles from time to time, and we are in the process of changing them again. Homo sapiens males that biological fit the description for roaming sexual predators were constrained by the introduction of formal roles and institutions such as marriage. Marriage is not natural. It happens in Homo sapiens. And why is it happening? Men are actually naturally roamers, and they spread their seed as wide as possible and as often as possible. And then we had this institution who formalized some roles and constrained the male by forcing him to get married. And in that way, he must be there to help with the children, or at least to bring in what is needed for survival. So institutions have been playing a role for a long, long time, because I think marriage is coming for probably more than 2,000 years, I'm not sure. So it didn't remain the same, it changed as well. And what am I saying? The feminist movement succeeded, or success is to provide equal employment opportunities for women and the sophisticated skills and mental abilities required in today's workplaces bring new constraints and challenges to raise children and force parents to continuously negotiate their roles on a family-to-family basis. And what I think now is we're going to just stop over here, take a little break, and we'll be back in a couple of minutes. Okay? Thank you.